Okay, hi. It's Monday, 7 o'clock. It's February 27th, 2017. I'm here with the amazing students of EBC 534. Many of these students are en route to obtaining the graduate certificate in digital literacy. Woo-hoo, right? So we're very happy you've joined us. I see Marie, I see Hong Yan, Nicole, I see Donna, I see Olivia, I see Lourdes, I see Vanessa, I see Tori. Mary Wallace, I don't see you, but I'm hoping I hear you.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just having some issues with my video.
No problem. You sound marvelous. Since our topic tonight is representational ethics, I thought it would be nice for you to see how I spent my my Monday morning, and we can see if we can make some connections between the topic of fake news and representational ethics. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, and here we go. BBC America about noontime today.
Welcome back. It is a phrase unheard of just a few months ago. Now it is common currency, fake news. Only this weekend, Donald Trump launched his latest broadside on the media, talking again about fake news. But thousands of fake stories being shared online, and sometimes it is tricky, especially for young people, to know what is real and what is not. Well, Ricky Boletto has been to one school here in the UK to see if students can spot the difference between fact and fiction.
We've given this classroom 6 articles to read, but what they don't know is that every story is fake news. So, let's begin. So, what's the verdict?
I love the UFO one because you could see it really clearly, and most other pictures with like UFOs and stuff like that you can't really see clearly.
I would share the baby one.
One that I most enjoyed was the baby one.
When I was a baby, I was quite heavy, so I think I believe this.
Do you think that picture's real?
Yeah. I would say the UFO one. It's just all the detail, because you don't really see a story like that every single day.
I think it's real. I don't think they'd put it in if it wasn't real. Maybe 1 or 2 were not true. They just sounded a little bit weird.
What if I told you that every story here was fake?
I wouldn't believe that. I would be surprised.
I'm telling you that all of these stories aren't true. They're fake news.
Oh, whoa. They look like they were actually on the news.
Didn't know what to say.
I loved it when they heard it was fake news. Oh, said one of them. Let's talk more about this with Renee Hobbs, who's director of the Media Education Lab, who joins me from Rhode Island. And also here in the studio is the teacher Daniel Taylor with me to talk about the issues that film has raised. And Renee, to you first of all, I mean, does that short film at all surprise you, people being unable to pick out fact from fiction?
Nope, it doesn't surprise me a bit. It's actually kind of challenging to discriminate between fake news and real news. And that kind of gotcha experience where kids are presented with something, asked to take it seriously, and then told it's fake, probably doesn't do much by itself to advance their media literacy skills.
I'll come back to perhaps what is needed in a moment, but Daniel, you're there in the classroom dealing with students. What do you actually say to them, tell them about fake news, and how do you actually help them navigate through this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to first identify what is fake news, to help them define that, help them have a structure around that, and understand that there's multiple parts to that. That's not just fake news, but that there might be some funny articles that are just for humor. There might be some opinion pieces. Then there's some factual pieces. How do you differentiate? And then from that, what we really look at doing, the biggest thing you can do for the kids is give them an opportunity to challenge things within the classroom and within the the culture of the school itself, be comfortable with allowing them to challenge that. So if they can do that, they start to challenge what they read instead of just buying it for what it is.
That's interesting. Let's go back to Renee. I mean, in terms of unpacking this, what is the best way to navigate this, to even be aware yourself that perhaps what you're seeing or reading might not actually be true?
Yeah, well, one great strategy, we find that you have to be asking who made this and what is their purpose, and what techniques are they using to hold my attention, and what values are they communicating. Daniel talked about this idea that people who are disseminating fake news have a lot of different motives. So learning to identify the author, the purpose, the motive, and the point of view, turns out those are core critical thinking skills about media, and the best way to unpack that is for teachers to model the process, showing their own reasoning process, and for students to get an opportunity to ask those critical questions.
It's quite sophisticated, Renee, though, isn't it? Because we heard one of the students, and you hear this not just with younger people, with older people as well, trying to grapple with this, that they said that it looked real, just the way it was actually presented, and that actually can be quite a distraction, can't it, and divert.
Absolutely. We use heuristics like, does it look professionally produced? Are there any spelling errors? What is the quality of the image? We use heuristics to make judgments about the accuracy and inaccuracy of web information all the time. But what kids need to understand is the different types of online information. So one of the things I like to do, even with kids as young as middle school, is teach about what is sponsored content, what is aggregation, what's curation, what are new forms of investigative journalism that are happening inside of mainstream media and outside of mainstream media? What's a blog, right? What's a vlog? What's eyewitness news? So once kids have a vocabulary for understanding the new kinds of news that are circulating in the online environment, the quality of the discussion can get a lot deeper and a lot more sophisticated.
That's very interesting, because there are lots of subtleties here, aren't there, Daniel? When you look at a tweet, for example, does it come from an activist group? So does it contain bias? All these things. Exactly. It's much more, much less straightforward than just fact fiction.
Exactly, and I think what I try to do as a teacher, especially working with young children, granted, with the permission set up on sites like Facebook and Twitter, they shouldn't be on there, but I don't think we should shy away from teaching them the skills to navigate those things.
And you've had to navigate some big issues. I mean, in the last 12 months, we've had Brexit, we've had Trump. What were you saying to students in the classroom about this?
I was approached quite a bit about it. I'd say the number one thing is leaning on what they've learned in the classroom. One thing that we really push our children to do, at least in the schools that I've worked at, is don't rely on one source, but see if you can find multiple sources. So if you're doing a history research project or you're doing a science project, you don't just pull one bit of information from the internet or from the book. Use multiple resources. And the other thing too is I always tell my children, if they're going to get information from Facebook, Twitter, or any social media, don't take it at face value.
Okay, so that gives us, I think, a little bit of ground to go on. My guess is that the topic of fake news has come up in your life, and that you probably found yourself thinking about it as we did our readings, as the theme of the balance between freedom and responsibility for digital authors. One of the things I really liked about what Daniel said in the very beginning was this idea of challenging authority in all the forms that authority comes, including in the classroom. And it's really true that in some classrooms, that's really a culture shift. And in other schools, it's to be expected that ideas and practices are to be challenged. So in some ways, this topic of fake news invites us to reflect on that ethical relationship between the author, the digital author, the audience, and the subject, which is really the focus of our tonight's class. And we'll see if we can unpack that a little bit. Yeah, give me a thumbs up if you have experienced rich and complicated conversations about fake news in the last, since you started the class. Yeah, for sure. And it will be interesting for us to think about how the ideas of this week's readings tap into that. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your Leap 2 experience. You can see our topic tonight: representational ethics, freedom and responsibility. What are the obligations that authors have to themselves, their subjects, and their audiences? First activity is reflecting on the highlights and lowlights of your Leap 2 experience. All right, so this is just open sharing. Open sharing, highlights and lowlights. What'd you love about Leap 2? What drove you totally crazy? What'd you notice about yourself as a digital author in this?
I'll go first, Renee. I hate this not being able to be seen, but I don't want to restart my computer. First thing I found out about myself is I can get too long-winded. That frustrated me, trying to be too concise. Squeezing what I needed to say into 2 minutes was like almost impossible, and it absolutely drove me crazy because there was even more I wanted to add. So,
all right, so give the connection sign. Could you relate to that problem of concision? Whoo, Mary, there's a lot of fingers wagging here. Concision is challenging. How do you make it short? It's really hard. Thanks for sharing. Other reflections on highlights and lowlights. Tori. Oops, put your microphone on, girl.
Sorry, guys. I learned that I need to be more conversational when I do projects like this, because I find that I write a script and I kind of stick right to it. And I know from listening to other speakers, it's way more interesting and pulls you in more when the speaker sounds like they're talking to you rather than reading off something. So that's something I definitely want to work on for the next project.
Got it. So you found yourself thinking a lot about the performance aspects of that voiceover and that performance. It's really true. It's a complex art. So interesting that you were kind of self-reflecting on your own expertise in that area. Other highlights and lowlights of what did you like about this project and what did you hate about it?
I was really excited to learn the WeVideo, the tool. I didn't know that was available at all. And it was very easy to use and just user-friendly. And I was very excited to have that experience with that tool.
Nice. So isn't it amazing how making one project kind of makes you like, not quite an expert, but you sure do know a lot, right? You learn a lot through trial and error. Yeah. One more highlight and lowlight on the experience of Leap 2.
I agree with Vanessa. I thought I used the same video that actually she used because I got the idea from watching her Leap 2. And I tried a couple other ones. Olivia's I tried and I couldn't figure it out. And I thought it was easy, but I did it on my phone. For some reason, I couldn't get it on my computer to work. And it wouldn't let me delete pictures that I had because I wanted to rearrange things. So I ended up having to do it 4 different times, and it took me 3 days.
Cool. So you had a learn by failure experience.
Exactly.
The technology didn't work exactly the way you anticipated, and you couldn't get it to accomplish what you needed.
Correct.
Boy, you demonstrated a lot of tenacity and persistence. Right? To try 4 different tools. And I like the point about how we are inspired. We got inspired from each other. Mm-hmm. So I've placed, and the ones that I've been able to find, I have placed up on, I have placed up on the website here on the main page. You can see the Leap 2s that I were able to find just before this class are shown here. And of course, one of your assignments is going to be to look at it and watch at least one of your peers' work and offer them some feedback on the Twitter. So I myself cannot wait to watch these, and I'm really looking forward to the experience of seeing how you made sense of these ideas using moving image media. Okay, so I want to do a little bit of a reflection on your collaboratively created slides, and then I have a little tiny mini lecture on teaching about, oh, what is going on with my light here? Hold on just a second here. I've just catapulted myself into darkness. That's not good. I need light. Okay. So I really appreciated the ideas that you generated on the PowerPoint slides. And again, just this afternoon, I've started to go through some of those and make comments. So after this class by Wednesday or so, or Thursday of this week, I should have my comments completed on your slides. Really appreciate the effort you put into these, and boy, did you generate some really great ideas. And so you'll be able to see my comments right like there, right? You'll be able to see my comments in the little comment box in the margin. So I'm working my way through them. I was really pleased at the variety of ways you found to respond to these ideas. And I think also I appreciate the depth that you got to in digging into these ideas, right? It turns out that these ideas are at the heart of the concept of being a digital author. And I was really, really pleased about that. Okay, so I wanted to just take maybe 10 minutes to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that that came up in the readings by means of sharing with you some slides that I used for a talk that I gave in Brussels a couple of years ago, right? I think this talk was to the European League for Middle Level Educators, so European middle school students. And one of the things when you work with middle school students you deal with is middle school students take risks, right? They take risks because that's how they learn. So very typical features of adolescence are to love experience for its own sake, go after novelty, complexity, and intense situations, and take risks in pursuit of experience. That's really developmentally normal, but it also means that both European and American children will experience risks online. So the best research we have on this comes from Sonia Livingstone and the EU Kids Project. Sadly, we don't have great data on American kids and their perception of risks. I wonder why not. Anyway, in Europe, we have much better data. We know that about 11% of kids experienced some kind of online harassment in the last year. 23% of youth experienced unwanted exposure to sexual material. 13% of children saw violent sexual porn in the last year. And 16% of youth experienced stress symptoms, sleeping, eating, other problems as a result of their exposure. I love this chart because this chart is also really fascinating. It's from 2013, but it actually organizes the types of risk that kids might experience online in terms of 3 different types of risk, where the kid is a receiver of content, like violent and gory content and pornography and racist content and marketing, where the kid is a participant and is actually engaging in some of the behaviors like harassment, stalking, meeting strangers, ideological persuasion, or personal data misuse. And then where the kid is an actor, either a victim or a perpetrator. And in 2013, it was bullying, sexting, and potentially harmful user-generated content that was of most concern and most on the rise to kids ages 9 through 16, right? And so we're getting to this issue of transgression, right? So it turns out when we look across the 27 nations of the EU that the more kids use online media, the more risks they face. So in countries where kids are using the internet a lot, there's going to be more risk. In countries where they're not using the internet as much, there's going to be lower risk, obviously, right? But about 20% of European children have been bothered or uncomfortable or upset by something they saw online. So it's definitely something that happens to a lot of adolescents, with about a third of kids saying, of 13 and 14-year-olds say they experience some kind of potentially harmful user-generated content. Now, the typical internet safety curriculum is kind of like blah, blah, blah. You remember the teacher voice in the old Peanuts? Yeah, wah, 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 wah. Don't put your contact information online. Don't share your address with strangers. Wah, wah, wah. And we know that kids can perform the correct information. They know what they're not supposed to do, but it doesn't seem to translate into practice, right? And so we've been experimenting at the Media Education Group. We've been experimenting with ways to get under the hood of kids' experience with digital media by talking about the ethics of online media, the ethics of YouTube media. Now, give me a thumbs up if you recognize this slide. Does anybody recognize this slide? Tori, I see you putting your thumb up. What is it?
David at the dentist.
What is that video?
Well, he got something done with his teeth, and they had anesthesia on him, and when he woke up, he was really out of it and was saying some crazy stuff, and they basically filmed their son on this drug.
Yeah, and this raises issues about representational ethics, doesn't it? What is the filmmaker? Filmmaker in this case is the dad. What is his relationship to, what is his obligation to the son and to the audience? And of course, the reason why that went viral is it was hilarious. It was so cute and funny. And a lot of humor online is transgressive, because humor in general consists of a play with meaning and an openness to the possibility of a meaningless world, introduction of disorder, surprise, loss of control, openness to novelty and ambiguity, and a disengagement with regard to truth, morality, and affection. So humor is deeply problematic ethically, right? And Dan Tucker, you wrote about this in your PowerPoint slides, and it is a fascinating phenomenon, right? So we have been playing with a kind of an old meme now called the Scary Maze game. And you may also remember this. You may remember when you were younger being presented with an online game, and you put your cursor through the maze, and you follow it, and you follow it, and you follow it, and you follow it, and then all of a sudden, poof, out comes a scary, gory image that scares you. So here's the original Scary Maze game, which has 27 million views as of January 27, 2014. This little boy is playing an online game, and out comes a scary face, and he freaks out. So what we've been doing is practicing talking with kids, practicing a conversation about representational ethics by asking kids to watch that video, the Scary Maze video, and just do a sentence completion activity. This video made me feel adjective because put your reason here. And it turns out that in that sharing of feelings emerges a discussion about representational ethics, about what are the obligations between the filmmaker, or that's the digital author, the subject, that's the person who's being depicted, and the audience. And in the readings, as you well noted in your PowerPoint slides, come issues like consent, free will, intentionality, consequences, social good, and spectatorship. And what we found is that even children in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade can get into these issues when we connect it to an experience that's familiar to them. That is when they're talking about a pranking video. So when we talk about pranking videos with middle school kids, we can ask, did the subject consent to the making of the video? Well, in almost every case, the answer is no, right? Because it's a pranking video. The kid does not know. The victim of the prank doesn't know it's a prank. free will? Did the subject exercise free will in choosing to participate in the game? Or was there coercion? Well, depending on the type of prank, maybe there was free will and maybe there was coercion. Then the issue of considering the author, the digital author, the person who made the prank video. Did the author consider the consequences of their actions on the subject, on the audience? Does the effect of their actions contribute to furthering healthy social relationships and a good society? Did the author act with goodwill toward the subjects and toward the audiences? And when we looked at a sample of 200 YouTube videos produced in the United States and Germany, we found that some pranks are actually done with goodwill. They are clearly designed to be harmless, and they clearly seem to have a harmless intent. Others seem more mean-spirited and malicious, and you can actually see that evidence in the content of those pranking videos. So we think middle school kids should look for the differences between those different types of motives. Finally, we say consider the audience, the viewer of the pranking video. In terms of intentionality, did the viewer, reader, or audience have goodwill toward the author, toward the subject? And in terms of spectatorship in a relational world, does the viewer consider the consequences of their actions as a spectator? Are we fully aware of how we drive a market for YouTube videos, right? By our choice of what to watch. So this triangle turns out to be really powerful in analyzing and talking about the many different ways that pranking videos can be understood and interpreted by middle school kids. For example, the videos that depict children in distress, right? When the camera lingers on the distress or loops the distress or represents the distress in a ways that is humiliating, right? That's really different than if the prank is over, the scare happens, and then we don't focus. The camera doesn't linger on the distress of the victim, right? We clearly saw examples where the teen is the victim and it's a family practice and the grandmother's there, and it's very clear in some examples that it's done in a kind of supportive family climate where there's like kind of a recovery and an embracing of the victim, right? And that's different than in other kinds of cases. And then there's lots of examples of peers pranking each other. In this case, this is Miley Cyrus, I think. Celebrity peers pranking each other. But what we found in doing a lesson on pranking videos is that kids could categorize different kinds of pranking videos. They could recognize the differences between representational patterns, and it really opened up space in the classroom to talk about a lot of online videos that kids wouldn't have felt comfortable talking with us about if we hadn't had that conversation. So we discovered that even 6th, 7th, and 8th graders could categorize internet video by what they like and what they dislike, the different genres like music video, sports, reality, etc. They could categorize them on an amateur, professional spectrum. They could categorize them by information, entertainment, and persuasion. And they could categorize them by socially acceptable or controversial, right? And when we asked why is it important to think about internet video in this way, kids talked about how controversial videos can be dangerous, right? And can have unintended consequences. So middle school kids are ethically able to recognize those kinds of risk factors. So we ask them to fill out a chart like this so they start to see some of the patterns. And in the end, we recognized that we had an opportunity to talk about how aspects of our media culture may reinforce the phenomenon we call Schadenfreude, which is the German word that means taking pleasure in the pain of another. It's a really interesting word. And in some ways, the lesson we did on pranking opened up a broader set of ethical questions about the way in which entertainment media may encourage us to be desensitized to the pain of others. And so that's why we really recognize how in media ethics, audiences are implicated by our decision to watch. We are part of the triangle, right? So there's no use, and it's not very smart for teachers to just point a finger and say, oh, you bad YouTube producer, or oh, you bad Hollywood, or oh, you bad Madison Avenue, right? It's a relationship, and we're all implicated. So we ended this lesson with an activity where we asked kids to write, imagine your best friend asks you to upload a scare prank video of his little sister to YouTube. What would you do? And kids got an opportunity to kind of practice their thinking about that topic. Okay, so I think we recognize in our own identity positions in as consumers of internet culture, this idea of, doing something for the lulz, right? The abbreviation LULZ, right? Where being mean and getting a laugh at another is kind of part of internet culture. But as this meme suggests, right, there are consequences, right? There are consequences to taking pleasure at the pain of others. And I feel like in some ways that's a great media literacy opportunity as we talk about our responsibilities as authors and as audiences, to think about that in relation to on news. And so all of these ideas that I just shared with you connect really deeply to Patricia Lang's chapter. We think about the power of images to stand in for experience and the complex social power relationships that they represent, and the idea that kids need support, right, in learning to make sense of these complicated messages. Okay, so now that takes us back to the representational triangle at the heart of the fake news problem. So now I welcome your comments and feedback, either on the issues of the ethics of fake news, or this question of using and talking about YouTube videos in the classroom. What are your thoughts about the challenge at the heart of this week's theme, teaching kids about the ethical relationship between authors and subjects and audiences? What makes this work so hard? Why don't teachers do this more often? What are the risks? And or why is it essential and important, and why must we do it?
One thing, when you were discussing what you did with the kids, and you said that you showed them the scary video, all I could think was, what if I scared them? What if I scare the kids in the classroom, by showing them that video? Yeah, good point. So could I unintentionally do harm in my lesson, which is about not doing harm? Yes. Yep.
Great. And what happens when those kids go home and tell parents that you showed them that scary video? What are the ramifications of the parents' perception of what you did?
Yeah. And is this the kind of lesson that needs a letter home before you start, so we understand we're talking about the ethics of YouTube videos? Probably. Good. Other reactions? Dan?
I think it kind of works in reverse when you teach all boys in a high school like I do, because if I were to show something that they would find to be, I don't want to use the word provocative, but somehow shocking, they would just want to kind of up the ante and say, well, then Mr. Tucker, then go to this also and go to the next thing, because then it just becomes a competitive activity, and there's nothing reflective about it.
Boy, I think we have all experienced that with high school students, Dan, where they want to show, once you show them that you know about their world, they want to show you their world darker, worse, more aggressively. And sometimes young teachers will make the mistake of actually like following respecting a kid by following that lead. And I've always warned them against, you never do that. You never do that. But it's true. Your framing of it as it becomes a competitive thing rather than a place of reflection. That is a real risk of this work. Other reactions?
It reminded me of my experience. I was teaching at this charter school right when they transitioned their policy of if some internet bullying or something happened, even if it happened off school grounds at home, and they just heard about it during the school day, that the policy became that the teachers have to deal with it now. That administrators will get involved. There's like write-ups that can happen. And that was always interesting to me to hear because, like I said, it was just in transition. So I don't know if they ended up putting in place, like, so how do you talk about it? You know, they just kind of said you have to, but they didn't really create the space or give the tools or explain or any of that. So
yeah, and it's a challenge because how do you frame up the ethical relationship at the heart of bullying? And partly why I love that triangle so much is I feel like it's actually useful for like a lot of aspects of my life, right? My mediated life and my non-mediated life, right? Because it's so easy for me to overlook that, like the audience, the larger social consequences that are implied by knowing there's, an audience. Now, the question is, how do the issues of representational ethics link to this crazy topic of fake news? Patricia Lang didn't write about it. Our authors didn't write about it. But what connections can you make to the issues that you thought about as you did your PowerPoint slides and the topic of fake news?
Lang said at one point, and she was talking about parents who had taken down their kids' YouTube videos after something provocative happened or commentary happened. And there was one comment that really stuck with me. It was about those parents could realize that that was a bad thing that was happening because of their life experience, because of their knowledge of the internet. But not every parent or not every person in a digital world is going to fully comprehend that just because of their knowledge and their experience. And I think that really ties into the fake news. And I know that the segment you showed was about kids, but for me, the fake news is almost scary with adults because they're not learning it's fake news. They're not in a school environment where they can be taught that. So that to me is like, that's scary. That they're not being taught the digital literacy now because they're beyond that, Yeah.
And I love the point about then thinking about the consumers of fake news in relation to those parents who are sharing and depicting it in this weird way without any thoughtfulness, without any reflection on their practice.
Right.
Nice connection there. Are there connections you can make between this topic of representational ethics and the whole fake news thing?
I have one. Sorry. My daughter is a 12-year-old 7th grader, which is not really fair to her because her friends are all 13 and they have Instagram and they have YouTube. But we have a lot of discussions over the private YouTube channel that she has, and we recognize that maybe she's not ready to make all of those decisions yet for a mediated life. And then add to that the complications of I left a domestic violence situation. And so what she posts publicly could be used by someone to come find her. So that's another aha moment that I have been grappling with my life and hers. So where is that media responsibility? How do we balance the mediated life with the responsibility of safety and security and what to do with that? So anybody who has some ideas, so these are things that complicated by it's media. It's not fair to not let her ever have any of these media. We can't live under a rock. So, it's part of that triangle of responsibility, I think.
It's a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing it. And it makes me think a lot about the concept in Lang she called context collapse, right? Where you're wondering, how could my daughter's videos be misinterpreted, misunderstood, or used in ways that could harm her? And when we realize that these things are ambiguous and open to interpretation, it's very destabilizing. And I could see the balancing act, very complicated for parents of teenagers. So thanks for sharing.
I have something to add to that. As a parent of both grown teenagers and teenagers, we've taken the approach of being a lot more proactive with our children. And I mean, I'm not going to say that it's working, but we haven't had, many issues. We haven't had really any serious issues. And I'm one of those parents that are very practical and think that as much as you want to protect your children from all the social harm that may be out there in the social world, you still want to be the first person to tell them honestly what is bad and what is wrong out there. If you let their peers and you let them hear it from any other social content, which could be either fake or not real, then they have the tendency of misinterpreting it and using it the best way that they can. So sometimes I go further than what I think my child should know, because sometimes it's hard for you to know what they already know and what they don't know. And I kid you not, because there's some parents who are so detached that they may think their kids are here, meanwhile their kids are there. Or they may think their kids are there while the kids are here. So, today some of us who work and who are not with our children 24/7, you find out that these kids know much more than we think that they know. So I try as much as possible to engage them, talk to them about some of these so-called either worrisome areas over in the social media and the news that, or the fake news, or the things that I think that are not even real, because they bring home sometimes. They say, "Mommy, listen, I heard this. Is this true? What do you think about this?" Yeah. And I go, "My goodness, that's full of crap. Don't even listen to that." And you should see their faces sometimes, So I think that we should take the approach of, really trying to engage them, which a lot of parents do. But then there are a lot of parents that put all these, parental guidance, parental restrictions, with their kids, devices and all that. And that is true to some degree. It's good. But when they're not grade level kids, 5 and 7-year-old and 8-year-olds, even those sometimes, can be, but if they're in the middle school and they're preparing to go into the high school, I think you should let them out more than we think, and then be the one who at least engaging them and letting them know what's out there.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of very interesting points in there. And for me, the opportunity to do media literacy with kids is that they will show me what they need to learn.
Yes.
Right? The minute I start asking questions and they start sharing, I get a diagnostic. I see what they know, and I see what they need to know.
Renee, can I add just one thing on to what Winnie had said about people, bringing this and saying, "I can't believe I heard this." And I just started thinking about how does this fake news then begin to propagate prejudice and bias, and people start believing things about certain groups of people that, we have an ethical responsibility as authors to make sure that what we're putting out there is truthful in order to prevent this kind of, the discrimination and hate that can proliferate from this.
It's a great example of a consequence of media, that it shapes our understanding of each other and of the world. 2 last comments before we move on. We're making connections between representational ethics and fake news. Dan. Put your microphone on, Dan.
So in light of what Donna said, and about the family dynamics, and then say, let's consider something that happened during Obama's term when a woman in the Department of Agriculture was let go because the information that was presented about what she was saying about helping out certain farmers and getting over her own prejudices, even though she was going to help a white racist farmer. Ultimately, what happened in that instance was that the fake news, I mean, why do we just use that word when, I mean, on one level, it's cyber terrorism or cyber violence to actually be able to destroy someone's life, whether they're young and innocent, like, you know, Donna's family, my children, anyone's children, or a woman or anyone else who's a public figure who has a certain degree of vulnerability that someone else can manipulate.
Can I add to that a little bit? So recently I was talking to my mother and my sister, and my mom was talking about fake news, and she goes, well, I know now that certain things are fake news. Like, I know The Onion is fake news. And we stopped and we're like, that's just like not real at all, Mom. That's just a humor website. And I think the definition, what you're saying, I think that is important. Like, what is fake news and what is, you know, actually inflicting harm to a large degree, like what you're talking about with cyber terrorism.
That contrast between The Onion as a playful parody and the intentionally constructed to destroy a person's career and wreak havoc. Yeah, that's a definite distinction. Hong Yen.
I want to say something about privacy and safety reason. I mean, YouTube is like we have similar social media. We call it WeChat. In China, people upload their pictures, their children's pictures, and their personal pictures online. But sometimes some people will download their pictures and use those pictures as their own profile, so that they cheat us. They cheat the people on his contacts list. Say, okay, I lost my ID card. I lost my bank card. Can you transfer some money to me? So this happens quite a lot, and now people are kind of cautious of not uploading their children's photos online, because there are many people who take advantage of this, and they try to trick people into believing them that they are the person. Actually, they are not, but they're trying to get some money from the person's contact list.
Wow, so they're actually kind of creating they're pretending to be the person whose information they're stealing.
Yeah, so the YouTube, I'm afraid, okay, if some people take advantage of this, children's photos or something, it can be dangerous.
Okay, absolutely. In fact, that I think is partly why I'm so fascinated with this issue of the representational triangle, because there's so many different ways that damage can occur. It's really interesting to think about the different ways in which damage can occur in the relational trust that's at the heart of being a responsible digital author. Now, because of our time situation, we're going to do a view and discuss looking at these 2 really interesting videos. But I'd like to ask you to watch them offline, because I think you'll get a kick out of them. One of them, because why not, is about one of the YouTubers who's featured in Patricia Lang's book, right? And we see how his children react to him videotaping them. And the other one is from a student enrolled in this program, Jen Robinson from the Thompson Middle School in Newport. And she tells a story about her posting an image to Facebook and her daughter protesting that decision. So both of these are really interesting about the relationship. They explore the relationship between parents and children around representational ethics. So do take a look at those. But today I get the great pleasure of introducing Leap 3. I bet you are ready for Leap 3 because like Leap 2 was fun, right? Leap 3 is going to be even more fun. So Leap 3 is called Collaborate and Connect. Here you're working with a class partner to develop an extended, rich dialogue about concepts and ideas of mutual interest and related to the themes explored in this class. You work collaboratively with your partner to develop a small, informal work of multimedia authorship that captures key dimensions of your dialogue. Feel free to stretch out of your comfort zone to create something using a digital tool you have never used before. You don't have to. You can use one you've used before. But if you want points for trying something new, take a risk. Take a risk. Try something new. You have to use Twitter to share your work using the EDC 534 hashtag. So basically, what I'm looking for is a representation of a dialogue between you and your partner. Think about dialogue. Think about what dialogue is really about. Have a dialogue on a topic related to something of interest to you that connects to the themes of the class, and represent it using some kind of multimedia authorship. So to evaluate this project, I'm going to ask, have you and your partner used dialogue to explore some concepts and ideas from the course, selecting ideas that are most important, intriguing, or problematic to you? I'm going to ask, have you worked collaboratively with your partner to develop a simple, coherent multimedia production in any genre or format to represent key ideas and themes from your dialogue? And number 3, does your work speak to a wider audience outside this course? And does it have relevance to the themes and issues we're exploring in the class? And does the work reflect the insights that come from genuine dialogue? And have you published it to your blog and tweeted a link to the hashtag? Let's start about how to start. So here's an open Google Doc for you to start brainstorming, right? There's the assignment I just read for you, and below is where you can, oh, here we go. I see some action on this already. That's awesome. You guys are, I love you guys so much. Grad students are the best. Yeah, Dan, I'm giving you the A for the day, buddy. Dan Riley, the other Dan. Dan Riley, he's wondering, can he do it early because he's got some issues around spring break, right? So he hasn't made any demands about the content, right? But he's got us some issues around the timing. Good job, Dan. That's the concept. So in this space is where you say, I would like to work on blah, 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 blah. Is anybody interested in? Or I'm especially interested in blah, 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 or, blah, whatever. So that's kind of your place to find your partner, right? And I didn't want to put too many examples up, but here's an example that you can take a look at of one done a couple years ago by Kristen Palazzolo and Cassie Suto. They did a thing link to represent their dialogue, right? And that's a way to do it. So there's a million ways to solve this problem. Okay, so now before I go any further, let's see what questions you have about Leap 3, Collaborate and Connect. What questions do you have?
When you're saying to connect and collaborate, would it be okay to actually even do a Zoom or a FaceTime or something like that with your partner?
Absolutely. Okay. A text message chat.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. If you wanted to use this tool, you can use this tool to capture your dialogue, record it, post it online. That's good. Yeah. Could you use Facebook Live? Could you use Vine? Anything you want. What other questions do you have? That was a good one. Your challenge is to find a partner and find a topic and start discussing, right? So one of the things that we're learning from this course is that it's actually relatively easy to even have an asynchronous dialogue, isn't it? You don't even have to be in the same time to have a dialogue. And we've used some digital tools that show the power of asynchronous dialogue. So if you need a Flipgrid, right, you can create a Flipgrid and create your dialogue that way, right? So just sky's the limit. Use your imagination. Have fun with it. Take a risk, right? Because that's part of the learning experience that we're aiming for here. Okay, if you guys have any questions, you know the best way to ask me those questions, right? What is the best way?
Twitter.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to what I'd like you to do for this next coming week. So we are digging into Freedom and Responsibility Part 2, which means next week we are tackling the topic of copyright. But just let me do one more thing. Let me remind you, next week your reflective essay is due. And this week, because of time, I don't have a lot of time to talk to you about your final paper project, but do read about that project. And next week we'll actually have a conversation about it, right? So read that. It's really, you shouldn't worry about your final project till April 1st. Right? That's your April is your month of final project. But look at it now and you might start to get some brainstorming as we come into our spring break. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do before our class next week. Remember that everybody learns from everybody, so view at least one student's LEAP 2 assignment and respond and comment on Twitter using the hashtag EDC534. Then brainstorm and find a partner for LEAP 3, collaborate and connect using the Google Doc. With your partner, make a plan for how you will engage in the first phase of developing an extended rich dialogue about the concepts in the class that are of mutual interest to you. And think about how you might develop a small informal work of multimedia authorship. So you're starting your brainstorming. Then I'd like you to take a look at these two videos. Kate Williams annotated YouTube Copyright Basics, and then how South Park, that's how South Park with a K, how South Park saved fair use. We're reading really one thing. We're reading my book on copyright clarity. You're going to read the whole book, but you can read it in one sitting because it's short. I'd also like you to read the chapter in Henry Jenkins' book, Reading in a Participatory Culture. I think that link is working. Let me just check. Oh yeah, it looks like it is. Good. Is it appropriate to appropriate? All right, so read my book. And then if you're really a weirdo and into the, craziness of it, you can read about my policy activism, going to the Library of Congress to formally request a permission for educators to rip digital videos. That's an optional selection, right? What I'd like you to do after you read about copyright, you're going to learn a lot about copyright by reading this book. I'd like you to just make a connection between the readings and the video as you annotate the video you've been assigned. So here are the videos that I'd like you to look at. James, Vanessa, and Charles, I want you to annotate user rights section 107. Lourdes, Tori, and Kristen, I want you to annotate the video copyright equals stealing. Marie, Dan Riley, and Mary Wallace is copying wrong. Dan Tucker, Olivia, and Nicole, you guys are responsible for annotating the Ithaca College case study. And Nada, Winnie, and Donna, you're responsible for annotating the where's the fair use. So each of these is a video that has annotations, a lot like this one, the one you're reading from Kate Williams. You're watching the video and you're making connections between the video and the readings, right? So that's the basic concept. At least 3 annotations, right? At least 3 annotations gives me a sense of how you're making connections to the readings. March 16th is when LEAP 3 is due. That's kind of a ways off, so we're not too worried yet. Let's see what questions you have now. Yeah, Lourdes.
What are we using to annotate those videos? Because they pop up on YouTube. So
yeah, they're linking to the ant. They're linking to the ant annotation. So see how they're embedding. Oh, I'm showing this without showing it to you. Sorry. Each one of these is embedded in the ant annotation tool. So we're going to use the ant annotation tool. So when you click on that link, it won't take you to YouTube. It'll take you to the ant annotation tool, and you just watch the video. You log into the ant, and then you annotate, right? So that should, I think that should be easy enough.
Yeah, I tested mine. It comes up in YouTube on mine, but I'll check it out again.
This one does, really?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's mine.
Oh yeah, maybe. Okay, thank you so much, Lourdes. Maybe this one I missed. Let me go. I'll go back and throw that one in the ant. Thank you for finding that. Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure I do that right after this class. Other questions about the work that you're going to be doing this week? Our topic is about another kind of ethical relationship. It's about the relationship between the author, who has the right to control their work by through the intellectual property laws, and the user, who sometimes can use that work without payment or permission under the doctrine of fair use. So it's another ethical triangle, wonderfully interesting and complicated, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun unpacking that. Okay, so Mary, thank you so much for letting me know. I'll fix your team's video as well after this call. Okay, so I think we're ready to sign off. Okay, so let me think, like, what did we do? What sign off did we do last week? Blinking? We did blinking? Okay, so let's sign off in the most patriotic way possible. Come on. Signing off, Sergeant Sacto and Renee Hobbs and EDC 534 signing off. See you guys next week. It'll be March when I see you again. All right, bye-bye.